From UFOs to psychic powers and government conspiracies, history is riddled with unexplained events. You can turn back now or learn the stuff they don't want you to know. A production of iHeartRadio.
Hello, welcome back to the show. My name is Matt.
My name is Noel.
They call me Ben. We are joined, as always, with our super producer, Paul Mission Control Decant. Most importantly, you are here. That makes this the stuff they don't want you to know. Ooh, the Orwell. You feel it when you hear it. Who controls the past controls the future. Guys, not too long ago, it seems like just yesterday there was an election. Remember?
Time is weird, guys. I think the pandemic really screwed time perception up for all of us. Also, getting older sort of skews time a little bit. I feel like it contracts and expands a little differently than when you're young. And, you know, a year seems like an eternity, and now it's just like a blip. It's odd.
Yeah. People who are not in the United States are always laughing when we talk to them, and they always say, oh, it's another election? Oh, that's happening again? The rhetoric is heating up. There is an ideological battle, and the battle lines are drawn. The debates are underway. Like, as you hear this tonight, folks, there have already been at least a couple of debates between the two main U.S. presidential candidates, Republican Donald Trump, Democrat Joe Biden. Again, as Jon Stewart pointed out, they will be the two oldest guys running.
Yeah, ever. It's a race to see who's best great-great-granddad.
No, I think Joe likes to go by Uncle Joe. Isn't that sort of, or I guess there's Uncle Bernie, but just the term uncle gets thrown around a lot, you know, because they don't want to go with grandpa. Grandpa Joe evokes images of that sponge Grandpa Joe from the Willy Wonka movie, you know? Nobody likes him.
Gotta say, great Grandpa Joe.
And the thing about these guys is, look, we know that political conversations can be sensitive. So we're exploring things with objectivity. The objective truth is that both Trump and Biden have been president before. One of these guys was vice president before he became president. Cough, cough, Bush, whatever. And the groups they represent, both of these, the purported Democrats, the purported Republicans, they have a huge agenda before them. Policies and laws that, if enacted, will determine the course of our great American experiment. None of this is unfamiliar. There's one thing, however, that may change the game. The supporters see it as a silver bullet to solve America's many, many problems. The opponents see it as a conspiratorial, existential threat to the idea of democracy. The name for this thing is Project 2025. Here are the facts.
Well, Project 2025, or the Presidential Transition Project, as it's more officially known, was spearheaded by something called the Heritage Foundation. This whole thing is essentially a collection of policy proposals that are meant to restructure the entire federal government in the event of a Republican presidential win in 2024. This whole thing began in 2022 with the goal of bringing on tens of thousands of conservatives into D.C. in the hopes of replacing existing federal servants, public servants, with individuals more aligning with a certain set of ideological goals, right?
Yeah, and that's at every level. So starting younger folks, especially at the lower levels, and moving them up. Kind of the way Ben and I started as interns at How Stuff Works.
Hey, come on.
Well, it's also one of those things where a lot of folks seem to think that some of the maybe more regressive ideas in politics, some of the slightly more othering and perhaps could be even characterized as hateful ideas will eventually get aged out as younger people enter into politics with more progressive ideas. This is designed to mitigate that and make sure those young people are in line with the ideas that are already in place by said party.
Which, you know, if we just take this alone, right? This isn't a crazy idea. It's people who want what they want, and they've got a plan to try and get people who like the things they like to enact laws and make policies for stuff they like. That's
passing the torch, sort of.
Sure,
yeah.
What kid doesn't make a Christmas list?
Well, but I guess what I mean is this alone, this fact alone, as like, if that's what Project 2025 was, okay, that's what it is. It's a plan, and it's out there in the open. Nobody needs to be afraid of that. That's not that weird.
Yeah, the thing is, the idea, there is a sort of bad faith actor concept in terms of specifically putting people in positions of authority over a thing they seek to eliminate. Not too long ago, former presidential candidate Rick Perry ran on the idea of eliminating the Department of Energy. He did not win the election for POTUS. He ended up being the secretary of the Department of Energy.
Yeah.
Womp womp.
That's a really good point, though, Ben. If the sole purpose, not just to replace existing public servants in those positions, but to replace them and then wipe it out, like whatever it is.
We see all the time, though, how, you know, folks as like maybe a bit of an attaboy get placed in positions, these high level positions, you know, heading up departments.
You're talking about Secretary of State Hillary Clinton?
That, or even
members of the Heritage Foundation that get put in positions.
We'll get to it.
I guess my point, though, is that a lot of times they're placed in these positions with zero qualifications or experience in whatever the logistical, you know, like actual things that require experience might be to head up something like the Department of Energy, the Department of Transportation. You know, I mean, you would think there would need to be an expert. Give us an expert, you know?
Well, the expertise, as we'll find, is proposed in terms of ideology rather than the subject at hand. The philosophical heart of Project 2025 is a controversial interpretation of Article 2 of the U.S. Constitution. It's this idea called the unitary executive theory, but it's taken to the extreme. It's the idea that if you are president of the United States, you have absolute power over the executive branch from the moment you end your oath of service. You can do whatever. And we'll get into the specifics as we continue our exploration. But before we do, maybe the best way to understand Project 2025 is to look at its parent organization, its creator, its paterfamilias, the Heritage Foundation.
Oh.
Guys, does the word heritage feel a little dog whistly to you? Like,
what? No way.
I mean, maybe I'm being extreme, but it just feels to me sort of like the idea of the way patriot has been sort of twisted in this odd way. To me, heritage describes like, yeah, we want things to be like they used to be, you know, back when things were so good. But the times that we're talking about are this imagined thing. They were the things that they weren't actually that good. They were bad for many, 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 many people.
Yeah, for sure. In very specific ways. This organization is what we call a think tank, right? That's very important to get out there. There are many think tanks, as we've discussed on this show. This one specifically was set up in 1973 to influence Congress, to influence lawmakers, and specifically to influence them in conservative values, in conservative legislation, things that would be, I guess, considered conservative. Again, that is a weird thing too. Conservative liberal has like changed hands a couple times, right?
Like Democratic pre and post Civil War. Like the nomenclature will change. The idea also that I think we're getting at here, Matt, is that there is nothing wrong with identifying as a conservative person. You
Absolutely.
know what I mean?
It's just different. And again, every individual is an individual, right? So you can't paint everybody with the same brush. It's just these specific individuals that founded the Heritage Foundation. What would you say? Came from money?
I would argue that they are leveraging and weaponizing certain psychological tendencies or identifications to advance the end of democracy. And I know we're not yet at the part where we go crazy, but here are the facts. As you said, Matt, it is a think tank, the Heritage Foundation, or street name Heritage, founded in 1973 by a nice triumvirate, Paul Weyrich, Edwin Fuellner, and Joseph Coors. These guys.
Coors?
Of course.
Beer so good you can drink it with your mouth, I believe is the tagline you coined for them, Ben.
Oh, jeez.
Full disclosure, we've done ads for Coors. We were talking about it off the air. Just put it out there right now.
So let's walk through these guys. So Paul Weyrich is a big time, what we would call religious activist, Christian religious activist, a commentator. He is the guy who coined the term moral majority. Nice one, Paul. I love that one.
Orwell would approve or disapprove. Yeah, you know what I'm saying.
He would say it's double plus on good.
Yes.
But this guy, Paul, also co-founded something we have a previous episode on, the American Legislative Exchange Council, or ALEC.
Oh, ALEC. Love that ALEC.
Can we describe ALEC real quick?
I wish we would. I'm a little foggy on the details.
So ALEC is again, a think tank, a thought leader, and what they have been accused of and proven to have done is to write legislation and then hand it to members of Congress who just rubber stamp it.
That's right.
Yeah. Which is, again, something that the Heritage Foundation does. We're going to get into it. But if you look up some of their early publications that ended up turning directly into legislation, like Mandate for Leadership, Policy Management in a Conservative Administration, or the ones that Weyrich probably had a lot to do with, where they extol the virtues of religion and how religion is going to stop illegitimate babies and it's going to stop.
Have you heard about religion? Well, it's the hottest new thing.
But it was a big deal in the news, especially in the news cycles. We'll get into all this stuff, but they basically said, hey, guys, religion's getting a bad rap these days. We really need to fight for religion and get people in Congress to talk about how awesome religion is again.
What about that separation of church and state? It's fine.
Buddy.
Let's throw that out.
Get him out of here.
Yeah.
Get him out.
Guys, can I just point out, nominative determinism is hilarious and delightful. The guy's name is Weyrich. Just putting that out there. Homie is way rich.
In Christ.
W-E-Y.
Yes.
R-I-C-H.
Yeah.
In Christ.
Yeah.
The second guy we mentioned, Fuellner Jr., technically, he's a former congressional aide. He's a real, Littlefinger. He's a whisperer. He's a quote-unquote foreign consultant, whatever the hell that means. He served as a full-time think tank executive. He was president of Heritage from 1977 all the way to 2013. So I guess they don't have elections either. And then he was president. That's for me. And then he was president again from 2017 to 2018. So he returned for another term, you could say.
Well, and then to your point earlier, Ben, about expertise, it becomes a different flavor of what expertise actually means. In this case, it's a matter of the foremost sort of standard bearer of a set of goals, a set of policy, ideology, whatever. It's not necessarily about who's the best man for the job, the best person for the job based on years of experience within a certain field. It's more about being, like you said, that term, which also I find to be loaded, and Orwellian thought leader.
Mm-hmm. Well, and one of the things that Ed did is create this thing called, within the Heritage Foundation, called the Resource Bank, that ends up being another way, kind of like Project 2025, to bring in other thought leaders to function both within the Heritage Foundation and independently to work with the Heritage Foundation, basically to get policy, again, the same thing. Trying to influence Congress, but in this way, not through words that you write in a giant, a couple 100-page document that gets sent to specific Congress members, but by individuals who end up having little chats with a Congress member or something.
And democracy is designed so that the individual citizen can, in theory, influence Congress, can, in theory, influence policy. But what you start to realize when you talk about these organizations is that the decks are way stacked against the individual because of these mega powerful groups of whisperers that have direct access that you or I or people, of our kind of echelon could never possibly attain.
What? No way. And none of this would be possible without the third of our triumvirate here, Joseph Coors Sr., the grandson of Adolf Coors, not Adolf Hitler, Adolf Coors.
The Hitler of beer.
The Hitler of beer. That's a great tagline. No,
you guys can have that too, Coors.
Yeah. So Joseph Coors, for a long time, was the president of the Coors Brewing Company. He actually, funny story, he came up working for the company in their porcelain division because Coors had a porcelain division to keep them alive during Prohibition. But they made it. And now...
Were Coors beers at any given time sold in porcelain containers, or this is just completely separate? I just wonder what usually when you see these pivots during wartime or whatever, it's because they already had the infrastructure or the machinery set up to do said other thing.
How refrigerator manufacturers made tanks.
That's right. Just curious. I wouldn't be surprised.
What if they were manufacturing Coors urinals? That's brilliant. Right?
Finally.
They do make you have to pee.
We call that vertical integration.
That's the best. That's the best idea I've heard all day.
Well, the best way to describe our pal Joe is to say that he was the money guy for the Heritage Foundation. He provided an annual
endowment, let's call it, perhaps.
Endowment is a little better than stipend, maybe. Yeah. At first, Heritage was like so many other think tanks. It was an ideological organization. It was kind of struggling to get policymakers and nerds and billionaires, or I guess we should say tycoons, on its side. Agree with us, right? And proselytize for us. We want to be contagious. All think tanks want to be contagious. By the Reagan era of the 1980s, Ronald Reagan, famous actor, was also president for a bit in the United States. By the Reagan era, the Heritage Foundation assumed a leading role in conservative thought. The Reagan administration took so many policy cues from Heritage. And so from their perspective, things are awesome. It's working. They're like the most successful think tank in DC.
Well, and on Heritage website, they say they basically wrote the, quote, policy Bible for the Reagan administration. That's everything from regulations on crime, taxes, national defense, that strategic defense initiative
Star
thing.
Wars.
Exactly. And which is just a missile defense shield, a concept, right? If you imagine, we've talked about this on other episodes, but like with the Project for the New American Century, they were all about this too in the early 2000s.
Also, I will say I don't think Reagan ever read that Bible.
Well, I don't think Trump. I don't think Trump. Oh, that Bible. Sorry, like Trump
the policy Bible.
That's
the
fair.
Heritage.
Yeah, like
Foundation.
Trump probably never read the actual Facts Bible. I do want to. I think it's very interesting the way the term that what you're describing, the X Bible or whatever, has been adopted in cinema and in like creative circles, or like even like in a company you have the Bible, which is your design standards, for like your logos and branding. It's all in this Bible. But I do think the use of that term back in this day is a little more pointed than what it has become.
Very much
right?
so.
Yeah.
The more secular term would be a concordance.
Mm-hmm. People use Bible though, man. I mean,
Yeah.
I know you guys have both worked with different teams and creatives and stuff, and like a show Bible would be the arcs of various characters as is codified within the universe and the world of your story. I just think it's an interesting the way that term has evolved.
I get in trouble if I call it a Torah or a Quran. In American English, you just got to call it the Bible.
Well, yeah. I think it's an industry term that's been.
But I just
taken.
wonder if this is describing something very similar. It is a set of standardized things that we all, as an organization, must follow.
Yeah, it's that mandate for leadership, policy management in a conservative administration that had 2,000 recommendations in it. And according to the Heritage Foundation, maybe they're tooting their own horn here a little bit, but the Reagan administration, according to them, they adopted 2/3 of those 2,000 recommendations.
All of the Old Testament, basically.
Yeah, and that's the Reagan era, and they have multiple guys. Mandate for Leadership is a franchise novel.
Yes.
It continues, and Project 2025 has its own mandate for leadership as well. We see this during the weird thing about it. Our pal Chuck would call it hinky. The hinky thing about it is that regardless of which political party is in office, every single administration since Nixon has adopted at least a few of Heritage Foundation's ideas. George H.W. Bush got pushed into Desert Storm, inspired by Heritage. He adopted 6 of the 10 policies written in Mandate for Leadership 3.
Hey!
The Return of the King, or whatever.
Why don't they call it just Suggestion for Leadership 3? Mandates. So no, there's these things are very intentional.
Well, they're still a little too scared to call them commandments.
That's also true.
Guys, I was just thinking really quick, and we're talking about policy Bibles for administrations. I just want to point out here that every other presidency has had some kind of organization, think tank, whatever, that's kind of in their corner, right? It's not always Heritage Foundation. It's not always, something on the liberal side, but there is one called the Center for American Progress that had a huge impact on several presidents who were at least recently Democratic.
And who's in the back of every room? Rand.
Dude.
Another one. You guys remember Project for the New American Century?
Yes, sir.
That was a popular one as well for a time in D.C. in terms of shaping foreign policy with a decidedly conservative bent.
Oh, hey. And they just like the Heritage Foundation, have these giant headquarters that are just a quick little stroll to Capitol Hill.
Shout out DuPont. Shout out K Street. Also, Noel, that's exactly what Matt was talking about. The Project for a New American Century. We have an episode on it. Do check it out. We're not saying these things are inherently bad, right? The same way a weapon is not inherently bad. It depends upon
who's got their fingy on the trigger.
Yeah, the aims of the operator.
The literal aim, where it's pointed.
Imagine you're a president with all that stuff on your shoulders, all that pressure,
All right, I'm here.
that. Okay,
Yeah, I'm
Ben,
here.
you're president, right? You got
My shoulders are big.
Dude, you got to think about everything, right? And you're thinking about everything all at once. And
You're starting to hunch a little bit, bro. Let us help you with this. Let us take some of this burden off.
I don't have time to read.
You don't have time to think, bro. You just got to act.
What if we gave you a tank that would do it for you?
All
and
right,
also blast your opponents.
All right, tell me about the Middle East in 3 sentences.
Perfect. Do that.
Yeah. So Heritage continued to gather power even when what we would call ideological opponents were in office. For instance, again, we always say this, do not be fooled by the kayfabe of American politics. During the Clinton administration, the Heritage Foundation took up with the idea of what we would call culture wars. We call it that today in the United States. So they needed something to get on Clinton aside from jobs. So they went for culture wars.
Maybe to nip this in the bud, too, lest we at some point espouse a political opinion that might piss off one side or the other. I just want to point out, and I think we're on the same page, I don't trust either side. And I think either side serve very similar masters. And it's sort of one, it's like a puppet show. I really do truly believe that to a degree. And I find the system of American politics to be inherently broken. And we're seeing more and more of that with what's happened with this move towards totalitarianism and this move towards the basic abolition of democracy. But I'm not saying I think Biden's the answer. I think he's as much of a shill as anybody, and it all kind of pisses me off and makes me want to throw my hands up in outrage.
If you really want to freak yourself out, go back to 1992 when the Heritage Foundation is working real hard on healthcare reforms in the name of with the goal of giving Americans choice.
We'll get to it.
So look at what actually got pushed through, and look at what's contained within. I got it. No,
but
save it.
Do the bend trick with the 2 fingers, and then look at Hillary Clinton, look at Obama. It's really
Let's do it right now. Okay. Let's do it right now. So during the Clinton administration, we got the Heritage Foundation leveraging and deploying the concept of culture wars. They wrote a publication called Index of Leading Cultural Indicators, and it's sort of this argument disguised as science about how 14 different variables how life is worse due to democracy. And the Clinton administration responded. They adopted Heritage policy recommendations, particularly in regard to welfare reform. And you fast forward through the second Bush. Yes, sorry, non-Americans. One guy was president and was CIA till he died. And then his son also became president. I'm sure he was the best person objectively for the job.
He's one of the most fun presidents to quote.
Have you seen his paintings?
He's pretty good.
And he does paintings.
At the time, I remember it was when I was first starting to get quote unquote maybe more politically radicalized, and I just thought he was the devil. But in retrospect, the guy's a teddy bear,
For a guy from Connecticut, he does a killer Texas accent.
Yeah. You know what I'm saying, though? At the time, he just seemed like the worst possible thing for democracy and the whole, everything about it. But now, in retrospect, it just seems laughably benign.
Oddly lovable in some weird way.
Exactly, yes. Yeah.
I would hang out
I want to pat him on his little head. When he's talking to the kids and the guy whispers to him about 9/11, I'm like, bless his heart.
I feel like we would have a lot of fun at Dave and Buster's.
Dude, for sure. Drinking a Coors, man. Yeah.
Oh, jeez. I think he gave that up, but we do have to get to your original point, Matt, which is former President Barack Obama also followed the lead of the Heritage Foundation on particular policies, most notably healthcare. And then it was the fact that administration adopted a pretty objectively free market conservative approach to healthcare, and the number one crime in the United States is to be poor. The ACA, right, as it's called, was weaponized into being called the Obamacare Act, right?
Affordable care or Obama?
Mm-hmm.
Wait, did they do that on purpose, or was it the other side? No, I'm saying it feels like
it was an attack.
It was an attack. That's what I thought.
Obamacare.
That's what I thought. It's sort of like calling it the Chinese flu or whatever.
It was not a compliment.
No, I didn't think so. It's again. a lot of time goes by and it all compresses weirdly, and you start to kind of forget where some of these things come from, which is Orwell's whole point about language and the nature of rhetoric. It's really easy, as smart as you might be and as well read as one might be, to just accept these things and kind of forget where they came from.
Yeah.
And now it's 2024.
Yep. Just call it the Heritage Consumer Choice Health Plan. Or,
there we go.
Yeah,
or
it rolls off the tongue.
One of the original names.
Yeah, or the Bill Clinton Health Initiative Alternative.
For the people.
Guys, don't make me be that person who like sees the Christian Bible and says, I like the earlier work. Whatever. The Heritage Foundation is a powerful organization. And as always, as any think tank worth its salt should, it has a plan. And now, more than ever, thanks, Fox News, the opponents of Heritage are worried about this think tank's plans for the future of the American experiment. So what exactly is Project 2025? What does it propose? Are the opponents right to be concerned?
We'll tell you after a quick word from Coors.
Here's where it gets crazy. The Project 2025 stuff, it depends on whom you ask. There are people who will dismiss it as a pipe dream, you know. There are people who will say it is an existential threat to the concept of democracy. But if you look at the papers, if you look at the policy, which is freely available online, you will see that Project 2025, by its own words, assumes some very high stakes. For the authors of it, they are the last line between tyranny and, you know, whatever their halcyon vision of America would be, which does not include you if you're listening.
Oh, man.
Well, guys, like, what is a conspiracy if not just a plan that doesn't include you? You know what I mean? It's sort of hatched in secrecy. But a lot of these ones that are hatched in secrecy, you can read about them. There's information out there about them. You just don't have the equipment or the know-how or you know, the information to decode what they're actually going for in certain senses. And I feel like that's what this is. Like, this stuff is technically out in the open, but it feels like a conspiracy to me. I don't know.
Well, yeah, it really is fully out in the open. You can go on their website and read all about it. You can go on BBC News or PBS or any of these other places, Fox News, CNN, and they'll tell you all about the specific policies that we're going to get into. And I cannot re-emphasize enough, Ben, that when you read through it, those stakes could not be higher. I agree with you wholeheartedly. Some of it seems intense. The hope, as we go through all of this stuff and we learn about it, is that whoever is president next will only adopt one or two.
Right. Yeah, there's a rule of attrition. They baked in the idea that not all of this will work. As
opposed to that, what, third you said that the Reagan administration adopted?
Two-thirds of 2000.
Yeah. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
So, okay, knock on
wood. So the idea is you hope for one or two and everything else is bonus credit. Because if you structure it correctly, then getting the right one or the right two will make it easier to do the rest of the job.
Like
and that's
8
just
to 12 years down the road.
Right. Because we got SCOTUS now. Yeah.
It's chess, right? I mean, it really is. Well, you know, we're scared of these people in many ways, but also I got to applaud their tenacity and their forward thinking. You know, it's kind of something to behold.
Forward Thinking is a podcast on the iHeartRadio network.
Yeah.
It's true. But you know what I'm saying, though? It's like they're thinking so many steps ahead, and they know they can only get X, Y, or Z probably right away, but it's all tiered. It's all designed with the future in mind, and that's not easy to do.
And in their defense, objectively, from their perspective, they do see it as a greater good.
Yeah.
In their opinion. So again, we talked about this franchise of novels, basically, of policy papers. The one that people are referencing when they talk to you about Project 2025 is a thing called Mandate for Leadership, A Conservative Promise. Spoiler, it's about as long as the unabridged copy of The Stand by Stephen King.
About 1,000 pages.
On and on. Yes, sir. It's not as good as The Stand.
And I mean, we know parts of the unabridged Stand probably should have been abridged. But yeah, no, that's wild. And that's another thing. A lot of this is like what is it like when an illegal team dumps all the documents on you at once so that you are literally stuck sifting through all of it to find one or two things of value or of meaning in your defense? That to me feels like a lot of what these overly long documents are. They're ensuring that the average individual is not going to take the time to read it, and if they do, it's going to be too complex and daunting for them to actually pull anything out that's worth analyzing or discussing.
I feel you, man. I would say that they are not attempting to obscure things through legalese or through, arcane terminology. They are writing this for anyone who wants to read it. They're very upfront. You got to give them credit where it's due. They're very upfront about what they want to do.
Right,
it's a conservative agenda for whomever happens to be the next Republican president.
And anyone in Congress who feels similar.
Yeah, anyone who's got a good vibe over on DuPont Circle, join up.
But basically, here is, as we said, we're going to use the term one more time, a policy Bible for everybody. If there is someone who gets in office that would want to enact these policies, hey, guys, you're on our team. This is the policy Bible. So work towards these goals.
And I want to back Noel up on this one. The point about folks not reading things. It is written in an approachable way, but the assumption does seem to be that the majority of folks supporting one or two of the policy points have not read the whole thing. So I think that is correct.
Let's go back to that point, Ben. In the year 2000, the House Majority Leader, Dick Armey at the time, quoted...
Nominative determinism,
yes,
baby.
Real name.
He is quoted in the Heritage Foundation as saying, "If candidates read nothing else, they should read Issues. No candidate should run without it." And he's referring to this thing that they wrote called Issues, the Candidate's Briefing Book, which was a similar thing, not the exact same thing as one of these mandates for leadership, which is a whole, as you said, been a franchised Marvel universe of its own. It's a very similar thing that gave everybody a starting point and specific end goals.
Yeah. Executive summaries, talking points. Isn't that weird? That would be the decider? Tell me about the Middle East in 3 sentences, says America.
How about 1,000 pages?
Okay. I'll read the first 3 sentences. They say, so on its website right now, you can go to Project 2025 and you will see they would love to give you a PDF. They would love to give you a copy of Mandate for Leadership, a Conservative Promise. They will also tell you that this handbook, as they call it, is, quote, the next conservative president's last opportunity to save our republic. Credit where due. This is the brainchild of many, many people. Some of the thought leaders in this one are folks like Mark Meadows, who used to be chief of staff at the White House, Stephen Miller, who is famously
a dick.
Problematic. Yeah.
Not my friend
Dick.
Not my friend Stephen Miller that I grew up with. This is a different guy.
Yeah, different.
Okay, cool.
Well, he
Steve,
was
you were
big. He was big in the early Trump administration because he was on TV all the time, just like as this kind of very acerbic, kind of young conservative, just talking point master. And I remember he would get real salty on some of these shows and real righteously indignant and like singing Trump's praises and calling him a genius and all of this stuff.
I just don't think you're a good white nationalist if you take money from Saudis.
Oh, well, that's the thing, though, right? Like a lot of this, the flag waving of white nationalism and all of these ideological things, 9 times out of 10 are just smoke, to appeal to certain voter bases, whomever there might be. I don't think a lot of these politicians believe much of anything.
So let's go to the director of Project 2025 as we record on Friday, June 21st. He's a guy named Paul Dans. And I know some of us have a thing about people with two first names, but that is his real name. It's not as cool as Dick Armey, but his name is Paul Dans, and he used to work as the chief of staff for the Office of Personnel Management in the administration of former President Donald Trump. And the handbook itself, Project 2025, does not, to be clear, it does not directly assume that Donald Trump will be a messianic figure. It says any conservative president, right? And to also follow through on that logic, if Joe Biden got reelected and totally went on board with Heritage Foundation, they would say he's a great guy.
Yeah, they would. Well, let's say there's an all-out war that begins immediately or very soon after the president is almost elected, or maybe right after they're elected. Adopting some of this stuff would, I don't know, would make for a good movie version of reality.
You're talking about the golden goose. You're talking about the real thing.
Somebody actually just grabs the reins in this way because, quote, we're under attack.
You mean like a coup? Like a legitimate
overthrow?
I
mean like it's Independence Day, it's ID4, and whatever, we're under attack and somebody's got to hold the reins and just make all the decisions. And
why has it got to be us though? Right? I guess that's my question, is like, it's just a matter of who seizes it, right? Who takes it and runs with it.
Well, I guess what I'm saying in ID4, I'm imagining the speech that the president of that movie gives, Bill Pullman, I think.
This is our Independence Day.
But what I'm saying is somebody, the president in this case of the United States, stands up and says, guys, I've got this. I'm seizing executive control.
I got you.
That's the golden goose, the unitary theory. And it's a dangerous thing. And make no mistake, Project 2025 is essentially, to the earlier reference about comic books and films, it is an Infinity War level crossover. Heritage Foundation and Project 2025 is like that moment in the Avengers where Captain America is at the end of his rope and his shield's all messed up, and all of a sudden these Doctor Strange portals open out of nowhere, and all these other in this case conservative think tanks join the fray. It is a coalition. Project 2025 is a coalition of hundreds of interrelated think tanks, and I would argue they are all pursuing neo-feudalism.
Are think tanks tax exempt?
Well, think about it.
Well, is it like being a nonprofit? Like, do they? I know they must have to be designated as that. Do they have some benefits, some tax loophole benefits in order? Like, are they registered in the? I'm sorry if I didn't mean to derail. I'm just curious.
It's case by case.
Okay.
Because it depends upon the specific demographic of the think tank. Is it private industry? To your point, is it not for profit? Is it non-profit? Is it a loose coalition of academics, who are still pissed about the free market or whatever?
Because an NGO could technically also be a think tank, right?
They are associated with think tanks. Yeah, absolutely.
Guys, the Heritage Foundation is a 501c3 organization, just as the Cato Institute is, as are many of these organizations.
PNAC. Yeah. Hey, you can donate now.
Yeah. Do you have $5 million?
You could give it to
one,
us. We'll take $1. And then we'll send you mail for the rest of your life and weird text. The Heritage Foundation, Project 2025 also notes some wild stuff.
But I want to get back to the thing you said right before we talked about taxes. What did you say? Neo-feudalism, Ben? What can you just describe what you mean by that?
Fiefdoms, right? It's like political fiefdoms. I mean, I think.
Yeah, 100%. It's the idea of replacing the great American experiment with something closer to monarchy.
Warlords. Yes.
Got it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
They
It's
just
a
want a
kind-
king again.
Yeah, which is what George Washington, legendary pill, shout out Shane Gillis. George Washington was correct when he refused monarchy.
Mm-hmm. And there were some people in his crew that really loved this idea of using kingly terms and throwing them around, and he flatly rejected it. And if I could just take this moment to recommend listening to the Ridiculous History episode with A.J. Jacobs about the Constitution and his book on living constitutionally, and crazy thing that this guy did, and wrote a book about it, basically to get to what the letter of the intent of the Constitution was. And a lot of things we're talking about today come up in that episode. So give it a listen. I think it'd be a good supplement to this conversation.
A.J. Bahamas Jacobs, The Year of Living Constitutionally. He also has a show with us called The Puzzler. You can hear some surprising cameos, including Roy Wood Jr., Michael Ian Black. He's just a delightful, very sharp guy, and he's also concerned about this idea, because the thing about monarchies is if you are the monarch, you love that system, right? If you are the, going back to some of our earlier episodes recently, if you are the landlord, then you love a landlord system. Project 2025 also notes the following, quote, "It is not enough for conservatives to win elections. If we are going to rescue the country from the grip of the radical left, we need both a governing agenda and the right people in place, ready to carry this agenda out on day one of the next conservative administration. That is the goal of the 2025 presidential transition project." End quote. And as we'll see later, it's low-key hilarious that they're using the word transition in particular. Yeah.
Yeah. More like seizing, right?
Yeah,
I mean, the transition is nothing to do with it. Like what we saw with the insurrection. It's just the idea of rejecting transition is what it is.
Yeah, that's a radical left term, if you ask me.
Yeah. Also, like, as we were saying earlier, this project, if you sit through this unabridged policy version of The Stand, what you're going to find is that if we're listening tonight and we feel that we are ourselves maybe more conservative, fiscally, socially, whatever, you will be surprised, fellow conspiracy realists, by how hyper conservative Project 2025 is. I can say with certitude, no matter how you feel when you're listening right now, you will find something in this document that you think is super up, because it is a blue sky, messy spaghetti bowl of ideas that don't always agree with each other. They're trying to upend norms and institutions. And to the earlier points we made, they are assuming that they only need a few of these to get through and become laws. I mean, let's look at the specific goals.
Ben, I think about this as, for some reason, a shotgun and like birdshot round that sprays really wide with tiny little balls. But in this case, it's like buckshot sized balls inside the amount that you would get with a birdshot round.
It's it's the literal spray and pray method, you know? I mean, sorry.
But let's wait for a second, hear a word from our sponsor, and then get into these specifics.
So the Project 2025 document, this leadership or thought leader novel, it generally has 4 pillars, right? Because it echoes in some ways the structure of religious thought. So the first pillar is to, quote, restore the family as the centerpiece of American life. What do we think that means Can we hear that whistle?
Yeah, and I choked on it. I mean, you ever choked on the little thing inside a whistle, and then all of a sudden you're just whistling every time you breathe? That's what's happening. Okay, well, it happens. It happens delightfully in cartoons. But yeah, dude, the idea it's inherently dog whistly. The American life, the family. Families mean so many different things these days, and this idea of the heritage version of the family. Think about the families of old, husband, wife, Johnny
Cousins,
and Jenny,
kissing.
Well, that too. But that's the thing, though. All of it's illusion. All of it's a fantasy. The husbands were cheating left and right. There was abuse going on, horrible things. There's no magical golden time where the family was this perfect unit of existence. But what this means is getting rid of any kind of queer elements in families, LGBTQI plus. Just burn it with fire. Kill it with fire.
It's, yeah. Now, hold on. Does it say that specifically in there? That the family is a man, a woman, kids, and a dog or cat?
But there are elements associated with these that say it.
Understood.
Because of the elements that can unfilteredly spew that kind of stuff as talking points, and that's what gets people on board, and then they're kind of tacitly supported because no one's saying that that's wrong, right?
It's also, it's a culture war piece, right? And the second pillar is the idea of dismantling institutions and norms, which, just so you know, if you have ever spent time in Latin America or the continent of Africa, when that stuff goes sideways, it escalates quickly. It is very important to remember that. You know what I mean? Libertarian, conservative, Green Party, Democrat, whatever. You kind of need that stuff to happen. You need the roads to work. You need the light switch to turn on. You need to be able to drink the water. Project 2025 aims to dismantle a lot of the, I would say, the circulatory system, the anatomy of the American state.
And replace it with what?
Feudalism.
Isn't that chaos? Isn't that anarchy? I just, who's in charge of the utilities? Like I don't understand, like the basics of running the infrastructure. Where does that go to? Someone's got to run those administrations, and we know there a lot of red tape, and it's a pain in the butt to deal with. But it's at least you got someone you know who to call if your lights don't work.
That's a great point. I'm being a little hyperbolic. The idea is to eliminate some institutions like the Department of Energy, Education, Commerce, and then to make the Department of Justice sort of like a lapdog, sock puppet, and then to replace the current federal employees, civil servants, with people whose only qualification is their ideological loyalty.
Yeah. In other words, so this would eliminate a crap ton of jobs.
Well, it would. My understanding via the BBC and a couple other places, they would remove protections like that. You've got a good government job, you're protected in that position. They would remove the protections, the shielding that, let's say, an individual government employee has. Then that person could be fired, and an appointee then, like they're making it easier for an appointee system to be put in place where they literally bring in their own troops, basically.
Well, your qualification is your voting record.
Mm-hmm. That part of it's scary, but I will say there is something to be said of those protections yielding malaise and complacency. We always talk about government jobs. They're cushy, and you can never get fired, so you kind of just phone it in. So there is part of me that's like, maybe that could be reformed a little bit, and maybe people would do a better job, but then the whole replacement part is where it gets real sticky and real politically tenuous.
Maybe you shouldn't be able to be a senator for 80 years.
Well, yes.
Not with that attitude.
What?
So,
stroke.
Look, the mid-stroke, the third pillar here is the idea of defending what they would call the nation's sovereignty and borders, aka build physical walls and adopt immigration policies that we could argue, if we were the founding fathers, are kind of against the Constitution. Just not picking a side on this one. I'm just saying, if you read, you see the disagreements.
But one thing to add on the immigration reforms that they're hoping to put in place it's something we've talked about with other countries it's a system that's offered for other countries very often, where if you have enough money, you can fast track your application. If you've got that premium dollar that you roll in with, you get an American citizenship. But everybody else who doesn't have that kind of premium money, it's way harder to get in.
Yo, I met a guy on a train in Spain, or a couple. They're from New Zealand. And I asked them about the whole deal where, like, can you really fast track New Zealand citizenship by dumping a whole bunch of money into the economy? And he was like, sure enough. And he almost gave me a number. Like, it's something that folks that live over there are like intimately aware of. It was very interesting conversation.
Also, you're meeting people who are outside of their home country, which means that we can assume they're a little better off. By
100%.
Just by the capability of travel in that regard. And it is a known thing, to Matt's point. The idea of sovereignty and borders is very much a rules for thee, not for me situation across the world. It is, and it's only going to accelerate as traditional climates migrate into further inhospitable environments. It is going to happen now, very soon. The fourth pillar, just going to leave that one there. Think about that one. The fourth pillar is Project 2025 wants to secure what they would call God-given individual rights to live freely. This translates to tax cuts for wealthy people.
Well, can we talk a little bit right now about something I brought up on a recent episode? I can't remember. It was not about this, but Trump has recently come out saying that he would eliminate the income tax and replace it with tariffs, like heavy tariffs. Isn't that sort of within this kind of conversation here, that idea of like being isolationist and, you know, getting rid of like these taxes that we have to pay, giving us big old tax cuts, or again, to your point, probably more likely the super wealthy, and passing that on to other countries that we do business with. But it's kind of inherently flawed and would cause the whole system as it currently exists to collapse under its own weight.
I'm just going back in time, guys, thinking about the North American Treaty, what is NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement that was, isn't that Clinton administration? Maybe it's before that. I thought that was Clinton administration, but that the concept of open free trade, right? Where it's easier to do business. It's better for the corporations versus that kind of system that you just described, Noel, where it's way worse for the corporations, but it's better for the individuals who maybe own the corporations, which is an interesting battle, like ideological battle happening. But in the end, the same people benefit.
Dun 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 dun.
Moves within moves. But devil's advocate, wouldn't we also, as the individuals who are not corporate shareholders, and benefit as well? Or would those tariffs ultimately get passed on to us in terms of the increase in price of consumer goods?
We are the great battery, the consumer, right? Each one of us. We are buying the stuff that is being manufactured, that tariffs are being placed upon, the raw materials.
You're going so Matrix, and I love it.
I'm sorry.
No, don't apologize.
So we might save something by not having to pay as much tax, but we're going to end up paying it somewhere down the line eventually, no matter what.
We'll feel so good because we're paying the man less, but then we're like, oh crap, this $25 can of Coors.
How much can a can of Coors possibly cost, Matthew?
I say that we propose a new currency system. You can have regular dollars, or you can have premium dollars, because we used the word premium earlier. So why don't we go America Plus? You know what I mean? Now you've got your dollar plus. You got your $5 plus.
And whatever Saudi Arabia is trading oil in now.
Hey,
That's double plus ungood.
Oh, we missed our strange news. We had such good conversations about it. Oh, we could never go to Saudi Arabia again. So first, as we mentioned earlier, 2025, Project 2025 calls for firing thousands of unelected civil servants, hashtag nerds, or as you said, Noel, in some cases, it's true. People just running the clock down for their pension. Project 2025 also does hate the idea of pensions. The idea of firing these people, or the logic is that they are somehow allied with a deep state. And the problem is, and Project 2025 recognizes this, the problem is that those positions, those civil servant positions, which are unelected, are mission critical to the function of the United States in terms of both statehood and in terms of business, domestic and abroad. So they have to replace them with someone. They're going to replace them with people whose qualifications are entirely ideological.
That just seems real sketch to me. It's like when Elon swooped in and took over Twitter and fired all those like crucial key workers, and then all of a sudden the system just broke because he just left these whole departments that were, mitigating some of the horrible content that was on there and being gatekeepers for the kind of stuff that was allowed to flow through. All of a sudden that just wasn't happening, and then they were surprised to find that the system broke down. I'm sorry, I'm just using business as a microcosm of like what we're talking about here.
I want to add something that Mike Wendling wrote pretty recently in the BBC about this, and it's his notes on Project 2025's adjustments to climate, the way the government handles climate issues as well as economic issues that we're talking about here in those government jobs and how that's all interconnected, and what Trump recently said. Okay, just really quickly.
Yeah.
He says the paper sets out two competing visions on tariffs and is divided on whether the next president should try to boost free trade or to raise barriers to exports. But the economic advisors writing within Project 2025 suggest that a second Trump administration should slash corporate and income taxes, abolish the Federal Reserve, and even consider a return to gold-backed currency. So it really is exactly what we're talking about here. It is divided, but to hear a presidential candidate who is currently campaigning for that position again basically put forth and say, hey, this is what I want to do, and it's the exact thing that's written and described here by the BBC that's written in Project 2025, it is pretty striking, I would say.
100%. Like any Bible, it doesn't necessarily agree with itself. Here is also the golden goose of the thing, right? The main reason in the United States that powerful people will fund a given candidate is because ultimately they want control of the court. At the very top, there
the
are
Supreme
9,
Court.
Yeah. At the very top, there are 9 kind of ring wraiths who never have to leave until they die, and what they say goes, and they are in charge of their own oversight, which is gross and weird and stupid.
I feel like they've already been stacked in a particular direction that's going to, have implications for, many, many years to come.
Yeah. They're also in charge of keeping those private plane trips quiet.
Hey, you said you wouldn't talk about that.
I'm sorry.
So here's the golden goose of Project 2025. Just the same way that the ultimate goal of any political party in the U.S. is to control SCOTUS, the ultimate goal of Project 2025 is to execute something we would call unitary executive theory in a hyper idealized way. The concept is that if you are president, you control everything under the executive branch. There are 3 branches in American government. The executive branch is low-key a big deal. So this means that if you are president, you automatically control the Department of Justice, hire and fire at will, right? Appoint or de-appoint You could scuttle investigations. You can see how this would be convenient if you were, just for a hypothetical example, a president of the United States with some heavy federal charges dogging you.
What about the thing that I always remember from early civics class, the idea of checks and balances? Does that all just go out the window? Is this like the goal here is to like kind of remove those checks and balances and have the president be acting completely autonomously and just, single that unilateral, right? Is that right?
With the assumption that the war branches on three fronts. So if you control the judiciary, right, the judicial branch, and you are the god of the executive branch, then all you need to do is get the legislative branch to play ball.
And if they're all in your corner, politically speaking, and they kowtow out to everything you say, then you've got that locked.
Well, yeah, and everybody's got a Bible that you can reference.
Mm-hmm.
Just go to page 912.
Oh, that's a good one. That's the good page.
Check out the footnotes. They're fire.
The footnotes are amazing. One of the key things here that a lot of people miss, again, is the removal of certain government institutions. I get it. Paying taxes sucks. Okay. It's not, wealthy people don't really pay taxes. It's just for we, the poor, the vast majority of the United States in this crazy experiment. But the reason we have to play this game is because it's like being in a country club, right?
Oh, yeah.
The idea is that you pay some dues and you receive certain things. So the idea of cutting things like the Department of Education, it's Machiavellian to the level of taking the courts. Right? If you remove, and I'm getting Orwellian here, if you remove the ability to articulate and understand a concept, then you have disabled people. They will not be able to synthesize information. It's evil. It's brilliant. It's some real snake in the garden stuff.
Comply. They sure will comply for you.
Obey, consume,
right?
They live.
Yeah, they'll enjoy that Big Mac and that Coors Light.
Well, but Big Macs are 3x the cost they used to be, though. Seriously, I saw a table of fast food prices, which I think is a good metric of inflation because they used to be like the value menu and things were 99 cents. That isn't even a thing anymore. Now they call it there's another name for it that it's no longer like the 99-cent value menu or whatever. But literally the cost of a Big Mac is practically $5 or $6, and it used to be just $3 maybe.
The dollar store is selling things that are over $1.
So what
in
are we
the physical
getting?
store?
I guess my question is, we're still paying taxes out the wazoo, and and prices are going up, and a lot of jobs, people are fighting for unionizing so that they can ensure that they get these cost of living increases because that's not guaranteed either.
I know.
What are we getting? I don't really understand where the trade-off is even happening.
Well, there is under this proposal a deputized National Guard that can invade non-compliant states to
within our what?
Yeah,
that's like Civil War.
Yeah, there's this movie that came out called Civil War.
Yeah,
you should watch it.
There's an excellent novel by our pal Robert Evans, good friend of the show, called "It Could Happen Here," and it is a continuing podcast as well. Please do check it out.
Oh man,
because it could.
Wasn't that a Sinclair Lewis book too? Way back in the day, I think I have that one. It Could Happen Here, and it's all about this exact kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I want to read just so you really get this. Go right now. If you've got your phone, if you've got a computer near you, go to project2025.org/policy. Just go there, okay? And you will see policy agenda, and this is the short paragraph. We're just going to read it verbatim. This is about that book that Ben described, Mandate for Leadership, The Conservative Promise. Quote, "This book is an invitation for you, the reader, Mr. Smith, Mrs. Smith, and Miss Smith, to come to Washington or support those who can. Our goal is to assemble an army of aligned, vetted, trained, and prepared conservatives to go to work on day one," here it is, to deconstruct the administrative state.
Yeah. Also go to while you're there, go to project2025.org/playbook.
Oh.
And that'll give you a direct link to Mandate for Leadership, the Conservative Promise. It's all about the 180-day period after an election, which is very big here in the United States. Look, we know it's weird, fellow conspiracy realists. We get that it's stupid. These are strange rules, but they are being weaponized. I would say the most dangerous thing, and even, the why did you do this thing is the concept of the culture war. This document aims to erase language. It mandates the idea of removing terms like sexual orientation or diversity or gender equality or even abortion or reproductive rights from all federal laws and regulations. Like Orwell said, it is removing the ability to think about a thing and to articulate that thing. It is.
What does that mean for those communities that those things are directly represent and that are in a fight to attain or continue to have access to those things? Is it erasure? But is it erasure? Go eat a
quesadilla.
It's erasure of those communities, right?
So, yeah.
You don't exist as far as we're concerned. Your struggles do not exist as far as we're concerned.
And here's the con. Here's the gaffe. Here's the grift. The people proposing that kind of culture war stuff, for the large part, they do not care. The idea is that you find someone who is desperate and you hook them in with a tribal identification of some sort. And then by getting them in the door with that, they will follow all your other stuff. So the people who are proposing this, and again, just apolitical, this is a genuine objective point. People who try to take you in or shepherd you in with this kind of rhetoric, window dressing, what they really want to do is to have a loyal follower for fiscal policy that 100% will not benefit you if you are most American people. All right, let me get off the soapbox here.
Quick recommendation, since it's popping right now. The new season of The Boys really starts to get into some of these types of political machinations. It just dropped, like first 3 episodes are out, and it's dark as all get out, and 4, I think maybe, yeah, and it's very, very good and very dystopian and deals with a lot of these kind of themes that we're talking about here.
Love that show.
Me too.
Here's the scary thing. This is where we end it. And folks, we know that people have political sensitivities. Obviously, we're not attacking anyone. We're walking through, again, a wish list of stuff that if 100% of it is enacted, it is bad for democracy. Regardless of who wins the next election for president, and arguably Congress folk are more important than a president, any of
not in this model, right?
Well,
right.
Yeah, with unitary executive,
they have their way.
Yeah. The thing is that no matter what happens, any single Project 2025 proposal would immediately be challenged in court. The thing is, if you already own the courts, who gets to make the call? I mean, the reason they'd be challenged is because they are fundamentally
unconstitutional,
un-American, I would say. Yeah. They're not part of the vibe, and we have to face it. As a Western civilization, this is a very young experiment. It's very hold my beer. America is crazy and scary. It always has been. It's always Halloween in America. There's a reason that this country is the world's leading exporter of horror films. It's because people are, freaked out, rightly so. The idea is that if anybody takes up a couple of these policies, they will trigger a snowball effect, right? A domino reaction. And again, like our earlier examples with the Clinton administration, the Obama administration, the Biden administration, the thing is, it is a very, very good offer if you were president. The idea of unending executive power. You know, you are beyond impeachment. You are literally beyond justice. Don't be fooled. Don't think it's just Republicans that would do that.
Yeah. It only has to happen one time, right? And then you don't have elections anymore. Or there's a potential to lose the ability to elect, you know, your team or the other team, because you only need two teams, right?
Mm-hmm. Hey, buddy, Russia has elections every couple years. The numbers are wild.
Oh, hey, did you know if North Korea or Russia goes to war now, the other one is obligated to go to war as well? Isn't that interesting?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And also, a president unimpeachable is no longer a president by definition. Instead, it becomes a fascist, a template messiah, a monarch, dare I say, how un-American, a king. And
at least authoritarian, right?
At the very least.
Well, you'd think, though, they would keep a semblance of some kind of light democracy in place to appease some folks, you know.
Again, Russia has some banger elections, bro.
That's what I'm saying. You know, I just don't think they would. I think it would be too much of a jarring change, dare we say transition, LOL, to like just completely eradicate the elections as we know it. So it would be a slow burn, kind of, I think, the way it would ultimately take place. It would be kind of tiered and, you know, oh, no, we'll still have these elections. You can still vote for your local officials, you know, to give the semblance of that umami of democracy while functionally obliterating it for all intents and purposes on a larger federal scale.
Check out our upcoming episodes on election monitoring. If you enjoyed this one, check out also our episode on the history of artificial flavors, upcoming on Ridiculous History.
Have we mentioned fun at parties? I think yeah, it must be said.
Here's the question, though. Really, just objectively, what president, Democrat, Republican, et al., would have the integrity to pass over the chance at such enormous power? This is the Ring of Sauron kind of situation, and that remains the danger. Since 1776 to 2024, this is the stuff they don't want you to know. We look forward to your thoughts. We try to be easy to find online.
That's right. You can find us at the handle Conspiracy Stuff, where we exist on Facebook, where you can join our Facebook group. Here's where it gets crazy. Also on XFKA Twitter and on YouTube, where we have video content rolling out every single week. I'm quite delighted by a current video floating around out there of bloopers of some of our shoots. See a peek behind the curtain, how the sausage is made. The conspiracy video sausage, that is. You can also find us at Conspiracy Stuff Show on Instagram and TikTok.
I really love that video, by the way. It makes me very happy.
Me too.
If you want to call us, keep in mind that before you do, we are attempting to see the big picture here and analyze it with you. So if you've got just some perspective that we either missed or we need to think about, let us know. Just be constructive when you call in. We're a team, everybody. We're all part of the same team trying to deconstruct this administrative state.
We're all hands in the same sock puppets, you know? Or whatever, sock puppets on the same hand. I don't know.
I'm just saying, let's keep it nice, everybody.
Keep it cordial.
Call 1-833-STDWYTK. Give yourself a cool nickname. You've got 3 minutes. Do say whatever you'd like. We're not putting rules on it. We're just giving a suggestion. If you've got more to say than can fit in that 3 minutes, why not instead send us a good old-fashioned email? We are
the entities that read every email we receive. Be well aware. The void writes back. We will also say, to the excellent point that Matt made just a moment ago, this is a all in it together thing. No human civilization resides anywhere other than Earth for now. So we have to figure it out. Life is one long, non-consensual improv game. This is the escape room. Conspiracy at iHeartRadio.com.
Stuff They Don't Want You to Know is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.